In the city of Dnipro last night, the missiles rained down. Multiple streams that kept on coming. But these weren't ordinary missiles, and the attack has taken the conflict to a whole new level.
Welcome back and Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall, looking at the White House as we do want to get the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war. For that, we turn to Mark Montgomery. He's with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, it's good to see you. I got to ask you, there's so much coming out of the region right now. We're looking at some footage from the battlefield here. Much of the headlines lately have been revolving around some of the messaging and some of the activity that Russia's been doing as of late. Vladimir Putin escalating a tense showdown with the West this week, saying that Russia has launched a new intermediate-ranged ballistic missile at Ukraine. This comes in response to Ukraine's recent use of American and British weapons to strike deeper into Russia. Mark, what do we need to know about these new missiles, and what kind of message is Russia trying to send with these?
Austin, thanks for having me. You're exactly right. There's a lot of messaging going on. The first messaging was bringing in the North Korean troops. In reality, they had quite a bit of North Korean support already, with 5 to 6 million artillery rounds transferred over the last year. I mean, that's 20 years of U.S. production. But then to bring the troops in was kind of acknowledging Ukraine, you are at war with Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China all together. And now this latest use of a new battlefield weapon, and I do think it was an intermediate-range ballistic missile, just based on the ranges it flew and things. It was not an ICBM, as the Ukrainians originally said. That's another message. I think it had multiple warheads on reentry, and did some damage. I mean, on the sideline, I hope the U.S. Patriot radars that were there got good tape, and we can send it back to our guys so we can work some solutions to this kind of missile. But broadly, these are messaging efforts by the Russians to try to deflate Ukrainian morale and convince Europe and the United States to not support President Zelensky.
Just to help laymen like me understand, what's the difference between an ICBM and what Russia used?
So an intercontinental ballistic missile can fly, 9, 10, 12,000 miles. These intermediate range ballistic missiles tend to be, somewhere underneath 4,000 or 5,000 miles. They're both very hard to hit. They both go into space, but they are different weapons. And ICBMs have historically only been used for nuclear payloads. Intermediate range ballistic missiles can have both nuclear or conventional payloads, and in this case, it obviously was a conventional payload.
So this, as I said, is coming in response to Ukraine's recent use of American and British weapons in order to strike deeper into Russia. Why was Ukraine allowed to use those weapons, and could we have foreseen that Russia would react to that?
So I do think the U.S. responses to Russian aggression have been generally proportionate, not escalatory. Whereas I think Russia's actions, beginning with the actual invasion of the country, have been escalatory. I spent a few weeks in Ukraine last month training Ukrainians on operational planning and things like that. And I'll say that the Ukrainians were unable to strike the Russians, just on the other side of the border, the traditional Russia-Ukraine border, where they were aggregating their forces, putting their ammunition, putting their logistics. Those were off limits to U.S. weapon systems. So it made the U.S. weapon systems significantly less efficient. The Russians had figured out the rules of the game and were playing it in a way that made it very ineffective for the Ukrainians to use weapons like ATACMS and Storm Shadow. So giving them this increased range allowed them to do the job, these missiles that we gave them to do the job they were supposed to do, the ability to do them. And honestly, at this point, if we don't break up these Russian concentration areas, their ammunition areas, logistic areas, their close-in airfields, the amount of pressure they can bring on the Ukrainians is becoming excessive, and it is very hard for the Ukrainians to fight off.
What can you tell us about what you learned about the Ukrainian military last month when you were there?
So first of all, they are a resilient group. Many of the officers I spoke with had been, in frontline positions for years, not months. They're extended deployments. They're fighting. Several had children that have been killed in combat or brothers that have been killed in combat. I mean, the Ukrainians are all in for their democracy. And it kind of reminds me that for us, this is a treasure, not blood, right? We're committing a small amount of financing. And let's be clear, over 2.5 years, this is the equivalent of about 3% of our defense budget going to Ukraine. For that 3%, we've seen our largest adversary, Russia, our second largest adversary, Russia, lose 600,000 personnel, 9,000 armored vehicles, 300 troops, and really limit its ability to affect NATO countries anytime in the next 3 to 4 years. So we've actually got pretty good return on investment for our money. And while I do think the Europeans should and can give more, I learned when I was there that we're getting real value for our money. And all the products I saw were built in the United States. So the money actually was going to American companies to build things and push them into Ukraine for use by the Ukrainian forces.
I got to ask you a little more about what we've heard from Putin himself as of late. I was reading that in what appeared to be an ominous threat against Ukraine's Western allies, Putin recently said that Russia had the right to strike the military facilities of countries that, quote, allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. Is this all talk, Mark? Are we used to Putin saying things like this, or is this new?
So he is, if you listen to Putin regularly, and unfortunately I do, he does speak in these kind of stark terms. And I'll say, look, can he escalate? Yes. Will he escalate? I don't think so, because he knows that we're much stronger than him. He is struggling with a country 1/10 the size of his. He's struggling with an economy, 1/14 the size of his. He had the initiative of surprise. He already occupied significant amounts of their territory, and he stalled out. He is not able to impose his will on the West. So, I do think he's boisterous. I think the rhetoric is largely for domestic consumption. And while I do think we have to take adequate preparations, protect ourselves in cyberspace, build the appropriate missile defenses. We can't just allow a big country to say, I'm going to do this, and if you get in my way, America, we'll do something drastic. Because who's next? North Korea saying, we're going to invade South Korea. If you do something, we're going to nuke Japan, or we're going to attack the United States. China and Taiwan, Iran and Israel. We can't back away from these beleaguered democracies. It's not in our DNA as Americans to let the bully run the playground.
So 4 days after President Biden allowed Ukraine to strike parts of Russia with U.S.-built and proffered missiles, Putin is threatening to retaliate with strikes against U.S. facilities and says his military hit Ukraine today with a medium-range hypersonic ballistic missile. The Pentagon just responded moments ago. Watch this.
We've seen this type of dangerous, reckless rhetoric before from President Putin. What we're focused on is continuing to support Ukraine with what it needs.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst reports live from Kyiv. He has been watching all of this up close and was in the tunnels with President Zelensky just the other day. Trey, what about this new development?
Yeah, Martha, good afternoon. We know that overnight, Russia launched a new missile into Ukraine, targeting the southern city of the Dnipro. This was the first time that such a large weapon was used on the battlefield since this conflict began 2.5 years ago. And it raises questions about the message that Russia is trying to send. Ukraine initially claimed the missile was an intercontinental ballistic missile, but Russian President Putin says it was an intermediate ballistic missile. The Russian leader said in the future, civilians will be warned to leave areas where more advanced missiles will be launched. Putin added this about the involvement of the West.
We consider ourselves in the right to use our weapons against those nations that use their weapons against us. And in terms of escalation, we will respond as surely and clearly.
The escalation comes as Ukrainian forces are now targeting deeper into Russia to Ukraine. These moves are seen by the Russians as crossing a red line, prompting officials here in Kyiv to brace for an increase in missile and drone attacks. Martha?
All right, Trey, thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
In a televised address, Vladimir Putin confirmed Russia had fired a new hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile, a response to what he called escalation from the West. At first, Moscow wouldn't comment on the reports it had fired a new missile.
Да. Алло.
Its foreign ministry spokeswoman was interrupted mid-briefing by a caller who could be heard telling her to stay quiet. But the Kremlin is silent no longer, even threatening a similar attack on any country whose weapons are being fired on Russia. That includes the UK.
We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. And in the event of an escalation of aggressive actions, we will respond decisively and reciprocally.
This was apparently the provocation. Ukrainian strikes on Russia's Kursk region using British Storm Shadow missiles. That's after other assaults from Kyiv involving American missiles. In an interview with Sky's Mark Austin, an accusation from Russia's ambassador to the UK.
Britain and UK is now directly involved in this war because this fighting cannot happen without without NATO staff, British staff as well.
But you are using
plans.
Chinese dual-use technology. You're using Iranian missiles. You're using Iranian drones. You're using North Korean troops. So are you saying all those countries are now directly involved too?
On that subject, I can say easily that we have plenty of mercenaries from different countries that are fighting right now on the side of Ukraine. So what's the matter?
It's that kind of reasoning Russia hopes will force the UK to back down. But there was no sign of that earlier.
The front line is now less stable than at any time since the early days of the full-scale Russian invasion in February 22. And we've seen in recent weeks a very clear escalation from Putin and his forces.
For now, Ukraine's allies are still calling the Kremlin's bluff, but the threats keep on coming. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Next, Russia launched a drone strike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy overnight, killing at least 2 people and injuring 12 more, according to local authorities. It comes as Russia also fired a new ballistic missile in response to Kyiv's use of US and British longer-range missiles. The Kremlin says the strike on Dnipro was designed to warn the West that it could be used to attack countries supplying military aid to Ukraine. Let's first take a listen to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
Что касается реакции на наш ответ, я так понимаю, Зеленский испугался.
Regarding the reaction to our response, as I understand it, Zelensky got scared. He directly began to accuse his hosts of leaving him unarmed in the face of such an action by Russia. Well, this is probably a useful result, because it allowed at least to be closer to reality, to feel it on your own skin, I would say. As for what to expect from Biden and his outgoing administration, well, ATACMS supplies and allowing the British and French to use Storm Shadows and Scalp missiles, of course, is an act of leaving a bad legacy to the next administration.
Well, let's get the latest now with our correspondent Gulliver Craig, who's standing by for us in Kyiv. Gulliver, are Ukrainians worried about this escalation?
It's funny to hear Lavrov there accusing Volodymyr Zelensky of being scared, because that's one of the words that Volodymyr Zelensky has been using lately to describe the Russians, trying to claim that they're scared. I think in reality it's Ukrainians who are more worried at the moment. I mean, there have been new details coming out about this intermediate range ballistic missile that was tested for the first time yesterday. The Ukrainian military intelligence say that it flew nearly 1,000 kilometers in just 15 minutes, that it had 6 warheads on it, not nuclear warheads, conventional warheads, but 6 of them with 6 submunitions in each of them. So it's a very powerful weapon. The Ukrainians don't have any kind of air defense systems that could shoot such a thing down. This morning, the Ukrainian parliament announced that it was cancelling its session, or at least several MPs from the parliament said that they had been told told the session was cancelled for that reason. And so that has made people in Kiev be a bit worried that they might be expecting a strike with a similar missile on the capital. Though later on in the day it turned out apparently that the cabinet had met, not the parliament but the cabinet of ministers, so I guess they weren't that worried. Certainly, though, Ukrainians are more worried than usual and perhaps heeding the air raid sirens a bit more than usual today. But what they're really worried about is this message being sent to the West by Vladimir Putin. They fully understand that testing this missile and the kind of rhetoric coming from the Russians is designed to try to discourage Western allies of Ukraine, such as the United Kingdom and the United States and also France, from supplying Ukraine with the weapons it needs and giving permission to use those weapons on Russian soil. And for the Ukrainians, that's the biggest risk. They really need to have those authorizations in order to have any chance of surviving in this war.
Now, the situation on the front line remains very desperate for Ukrainians. Does Kyiv believe that the green light by the United States to use, for example, long-range missiles in Russia can turn things around?
I mean, you meet some people who think that it's going to make a big difference, others more, and probably the majority, saying that they think at the moment, with the quantities that have been delivered and the limitations on the permissions that have been given, it will save some Ukrainian soldiers' lives for sure, and so that's a good thing, some civilian lives as well, perhaps not turn the tide. At the moment, things are looking very, very difficult for the Ukrainian armed forces on the front lines in Donbass. Russian forces took yet another village south of Kurakovo in Donetsk region today, a village called Dalnie. They're pretty close to surrounding Kurakovo, which is one of the strategic Ukrainian-held towns in Donetsk region. Some Ukrainian commentators believe that if there were a reorganization of the armed forces with more competent commanders put in charge of more men and an abandonment of the practice that they've had lately of creating new brigades where everyone's new and inexperienced, then they could perhaps turn things around. Because in a sense, given how outgunned and outmanned they are, they're not holding the line too badly. The Russians are advancing, but not that fast. Nevertheless, the personnel problems, perhaps that's the biggest thing really look like something that may prove to be insurmountable for the Ukrainians at this stage. They simply can't recruit and train enough people to hold the line. The Russians have got a much bigger population pool to draw on and a lot more money. They're paying, $20,000 or $30,000 payouts to anyone who joins the armed forces. Ukrainians can't possibly offer anything like that to people they're trying to recruit. They just can't afford it.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that update. Gulliver Craig reporting for us there in Kyiv.
But first, we begin here. The White House warns that escalation is coming at every turn from Russia as Moscow sends a dangerous new warning to Western countries helping Ukraine. A Russian spokesperson now threatens that a U.S. anti-missile base in Poland is a, quote, priority target. This after Russia fires a missile capable of holding a nuclear warhead into Ukraine for the first time in this war. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and FBI Director Christopher Wray skipped a Senate Global Threats hearing yesterday, saying they would prefer a classified briefing instead. News Nation's Tom Dempsey has the latest from Washington this morning. Tom, Russia is turning up the heat here. So what more do we know about their escalating threats?
Hey, good morning, Marky. This actually marked the first time ever in war Russian forces used this experimental and intermediate-range missile to target a city in Ukraine. And footage actually captured the moments of this missile raining down on this city in Ukraine. It targeted a Ukrainian military facility in the city of Dnipro. This is a missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. The Russian President Vladimir Putin saying it can travel at 10 times the speed of sound and can be fitted with multiple warheads, including nuclear ones that can hit multiple targets. Russia saying it warned the United States 30 minutes before launching this missile. But Putin saying this new missile could be used to attack any Ukrainian ally whose missiles are used to attack Russia. And of course, this comes after Ukraine used American, French, and British missiles to strike military targets inside Russia for the first time ever starting this week. New reports say in one of those strikes with those Western missiles, Ukraine wounded a senior North Korean general who was serving in Russia. And this morning, a new U.S. missile base in Poland is facing threats from Russia, with a Russian spokesperson saying it's a priority target for potential neutralization in case of all-out war. Now, no nuclear weapons are stationed at this U.S. base, according to Polish military leaders. Its purpose is supposed to be a defensive and is focused on taking out short to intermediate range missiles, just like the one Russia just tested. It's not clear how many troops are based there, but there are about 10,000 U.S. soldiers stationed in Poland. You get a sense of this war escalating even more this morning, Marky. Russian President Vladimir Putin blaming the United States for escalating the war, but President Biden repeating statements he's made over the past few months and years, for that matter, with this conflict, saying that if Russia were to pull their troops out of Ukraine, that would mean the end of the war. Marky?
Yeah, and then on the same day that Russia launches this missile, you have Mayorkas and Wray, who are no-shows. So what more do we know about the controversy from the House Homeland Security hearing, Tom?
Yeah, it can be rare for Republicans and Democrats to agree and show the same emotion, but we saw outrage from both sides of the aisle when the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and FBI Director Christopher Wray didn't show up for this annual hearing detailing threats to national security here in the United States. Again, this is an annual hearing that's held at the Capitol with some of the top leaders in defense. The committee says it's the first time in at least 15 years, the agency heads have refused to appear publicly for the annual hearing. This annual hearing in the Senate focuses, like I said, on foreign and domestic threats. Both the FBI and Department of Homeland Security released similar statements, with the FBI writing, quote, FBI leaders believe the committee would benefit most from further discussions and additional information that can only be provided in a classified setting. That was their take on all this, saying that this should be a classified meeting. But again, Democrats, like the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, saying that Americans deserve transparency and knowing more information about these threats, while Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida called the two defense leaders cowards for not showing up, Marky.
Yeah, I'll be asking former Governor Mike Huckabee about the no-show later. A lot of questions coming his way on yesterday's hearing, too. Tom Dempsey from D.C., thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Things have taken a turn overnight, with Moscow launching a hypersonic mid-range ballistic missile. President Vladimir Putin tried to justify this escalation in a national address.
In response to the use of American and British long-range weapons on November 21 of this year, the Russian armed forces launched a combined strike on one of the facilities of the Ukrainian defense industry. One of the newest Russian medium-range missile system was tested in combat conditions, in this case with a ballistic missile in a nuclear hypersonic warhead. We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities.
I really hate giving him a platform. I'm lucky enough now to be joined in the studio by my regular guest, Ukrainian Defense Advisor Yuri Sak, who I'm now meeting in person for the first time. So lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure to meet you, Aaron.
You've been so incredible and out and about. You're one of the probably top two people that my audience will say to me, he's so powerful, he's incredible. How are you, would be my first question.
Quite frankly, Erin, when I thought that one day might see you in person, I thought I would be able to tell you a bit more good news. I thought we'd be talking about how Ukraine has won the war. We'd be talking how Putin is behind bars and awaiting sentencing for the crimes that he has committed. And I thought that we'd be rebuilding Ukraine. But here I am, 1,003 days into this war. More than 11 million people in my country have been displaced. 6 of them are living abroad now as refugees. Almost 30% of our territory is heavily infested with mines. And according to the World Health Organization, more than 10 million people in Ukraine, and that includes both adults as well as kids, are regularly, chronically suffering from war-related traumas. So that's a long version to answer your question, how am I? We are holding on still because we're resilient, and thanks to our partners, our resilience is supported by weapons and stuff that we can use to defend ourselves. But of course, there is not another nation in this world that wants this war to end sooner than later than Ukrainians.
You said to me very early on, and it's a similar story to what Israel is saying now regarding the intentions of Iran. Russia doesn't want to just stop at Ukraine. It's not just about Ukraine. He's now, Vladimir Putin, threatening the West. You said this would happen from day one. You're right. It doesn't end with Ukraine. If Russia wins, it does not stop there.
Moreover, Erin, you're absolutely right. But if you look at what is happening right now is, while we, Ukrainians, are supported by the free nations of this world, and I'd like to use this opportunity to say a simple thing, that every Australian can rightfully be proud of the fact that your country stands with our country in these difficult times. But at the same time, we're seeing the formation at the moment of a new axis of evil. Right now, more than 10,000 North Koreans, for a minute, North Koreans are facing Ukrainian soldiers. And as our former commander-in-chief said yesterday, we are now fighting somebody else's enemy. The same way we are shooting down in our skies Shahed drones, which originally have been created for somebody else, not for Ukraine. So these are very alarming signs because, and in pretty much everything that we shoot down, we find, of course, components from China.
Of course you do.
So Russia and its friends are, of course, after not just destroying Ukraine and our identity, culture and future, they are after destroying the values, our values and your values. So any talk about the peaceful settlement of this war should take that into account. For as long as Ukraine stands, we stand a chance of continuing to live in a world based on freedoms such as democracy, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But that world doesn't suit these guys. Russia and friends don't like it. They hate everything we are prepared to die for. And I think that's a black and white situation, and we are thankful that our partners understand that.
Nuclear war. What do you think the possibility is of Putin using that capability?
We have to be realistic, and that means that if a country has the largest in the world arsenal of nuclear warheads, there is some mathematical probability that at some point it might be used. Now, at the same time, we have seen during the last almost 3 years that we have crossed the red lines, the mythical red lines that Russia keeps drawing on so many occasions. And thankfully, every time we just exposed the Kremlin for what they are. They are blackmailers who are bluffing their way into the new world order. So, of course, we are doing what we can to protect ourselves, and that means we're not just asking our partners to provide us with military support. We are building an arsenal of the free world in Ukraine, because what we say, we are fighting the freedom war, and for this fight, we need weapons. So we are, for example, we are now capable of producing 30,000 long-range drones in Ukraine, deep strike drones. We are producing 4 million other FPV-type drones. And just for your information and understanding, more than 90% of the military tanks, armored vehicles of the Russians that we destroy today, we destroy by using these drones. So we are becoming, in addition, the situation is very difficult along the front lines. People are crumbling. It's very hard. But at the same time, there are sides that makes us stronger. We are building up our defense industry. Our alliance is growing, and we just have to stay optimistic.
30 seconds or less, that's all I've got left. What are you doing in Australia? Are you asking our government for more?
We are always grateful for the support that we have received, but it's a war of unprecedented scale. So, of course, we need more. And, Australia, I spoke to members of the Ukrainian community here in Australia, to people from the defense sector, and apparently there are things that can still be done. We are thankful, for example, for the 49 Abrams tanks. Yeah. The decision to pass them on to us has been already taken. But, if more can be done, we would just only be grateful and thankful.
Yuri, we stand with you. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to have you sitting there in the rebuilding phase of this cruel, evil, immoral war that Vladimir Putin has waged against your people.
Thanks to friends like Australia, this day will come.
I have no doubt. Thanks to people like you and your countrymen. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, hello viewers. Now listen to this. You saw from the opening, you heard what's going on, and probably by now you understand where we at. Blink of World War III. The thing is, Biden is not doing it by himself. If he is, it's because of his mental stability. But believe me, he is not the one behind all this. Biden has puppet masters who are controlling US, not him. So the puppet masters did not like what they saw that Trump won, and he said he was going to end the war before he takes office, and the signs did show that he was going to do that. What were the signs? You heard everyone now started talking about peace, settling these wars in the Middle East, to settle them. And look at what the puppet masters saw. They didn't want Trump to get this win because they'll think, oh, he'll go down as a hero. So what do? They want to start a World War III. But listen to this. All power belongs to God. If God wills, he will let whatever that was spoken of in the book of Revelation to happen. If he is in control, the World War III will not be started, and these puppet masters will be ashamed that the World War III wasn't started, because God had already promised prosperity for USA. You see, he did promise prosperity if Donald Trump won the elections. So let's not take what's going on. You can see the news. Look at that. See what's going on. Everyone now is just interested to see what's going on. This is hot news right now. The thing is, people who are underrating or underestimating Putin will cause a World War III. Because even World War II probably was started by someone thinking, we can win this war, let's go. And they found that, oh, the war became bigger. That's what would happen with this World War III. Putin has his side. You know the nations that are working with Putin. You have BRICS nations, you know about those. And US should not forget that. In South America, there are nations that are part of BRICS. So it means those will be easier places to target USA. And you know also that USA is just a neighbor to Russia. Let's look at the map. Maybe many of you don't know about this. Do you see that? There is Russia, there is USA. Someone will say, well, it's just Alaska, they can bomb Alaska, no problem. We are down here. My dear, Russia has intercontinental missiles that will easily cross right there to reach there. Many of you may be thinking, oh, maybe they are shooting from this side. No. It will be like that. Who is in Russia? Who knows what they have right here? They could have set up already stuff right there that will just easily come over there. Now, let me show you that this World War III is inevitable. Not now. In future, it will happen. Let me show you. Go watch this video. Go watch this video. The mystery of the four horsemen. When you're done watching this video, do this right thing. Come and watch this one. The second horseman. That is focusing on the four horsemen. If you think Putin will lose this war or Putin can be cleared without causing a World War III, go watch this video, or do yourself a favor, go and read Revelation chapter 6. Tell me what the second horseman does. You tell me what the second horseman does. Look at the destruction he causes. Let's just go over there. What does that say? He was given power to do what? To take peace from the earth. Putin. God is going to use him. Look, who is now in charge of these horsemen? God is in charge of the second horseman. He can unleash him now if he wants. But looking at the scriptures and the prophecies, I'm using my mind, not God. So get this, I just did a video on prophecy and understanding prophecy. So now, I, not the Lord, looking at the scripture, the times and the other prophecies, looking at these, I don't think World War III will happen now. It may happen, it may not. But a time is coming when Putin will be allowed to take peace from the earth. Look at that map again. We're back to this map again. Look how Russia, all this is Russia. And look at these tiny European nations. These are underestimating Putin. Easily, peace on this region can go by just a snap of a finger. He can unleash an attack on these nations, an attack on USA. There is a video I did on a scripture in Revelations that says, "Get out of her, my people." Get out of USA before she is set on fire. So USA will be set on fire. It's in the scriptures. So whoever, I may even, if I were to say, go speak to the Pentagon and whoever, the FBI, whatever intelligence, Donald Trump or whoever, I may just open that scripture and say, read here. This is USA burning. It will happen. Take it or leave it. Believe it or not, it will happen. USA is going to burn. So in thinking, look at these other reports. What I can say, it is foolish to underestimate Putin, because he is in the scriptures that is going to cause or take away peace from the earth. USA burning. Read Revelations. Putin is not doing it alone. God said he has set aside these kings so that they may destroy her. Kings, not king. People, stop playing games and stop thinking. Don't look at this bragging thing. Even Donald Trump can say we have these weapons, we have this much bigger weapons. My dear, you can have all that, but we are looking at the prophecy of scripture. This USA is going to burn. Europe, peace will go from here. Peace will go. If this is disrupted, it means the whole world, peace goes. Who knows what the nations right here, they're part of the BRICS nations where we have India, China, and North America. So you see that Putin is not alone, but the media, let me say foolish media, they are listening to the bragging of NATO and USA that we have this much weapons. My dear, if you need to know who wins, don't go to a medium for a crystal ball. The only crystal ball we have is the scriptures. Let's look at, let me even put it up. Let's reduce it so that we have two things right here in the view. That is your crystal ball. That is your crystal ball. Let's look at what we're talking about. It was Revelations 18. It was in Revelations. Do you see this? It's instant. In one day, death and sorrow, mourning comes in what? In one day. USA is going down. This is your crystal ball, not this mouth or the bragging saying we have this much, we are many. Russia is alone. Russia is not alone. Everything I told you is in scriptures. There are kings reserved to destroy USA at a designated time. It's not yet time for this that is in Revelation to happen now. Another prophet may rise and say 2025 World War III. I don't think so, because there are many things that will be skipped to come to this point. So now you heard from the videos. Let's take a look at a few more.
Putin knows if he does that, he will lose everything. His government will collapse. Russia will collapse as a country. He will lose his activity in Ukraine.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The World in 10, the Times' daily podcast about global security. And I'm delighted today to be joined by former Colonel Philip Ingram, who's previously served as a military intelligence officer in the UK Armed Forces and as a NATO planner, and he's a regular voice on Times Radio. Philip, welcome. We want to speak today specifically about Russia's alleged use of an intercontinental ballistic missile against the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. First things first, what are we talking about here? What is an intercontinental ballistic missile?
Right. The clue's in the name. So intercontinental, it can go very long distances between different continents. So, and ballistic is the way the missile fires. So it goes up vertically and then will come down vertically in a ballistic trajectory. So it'll come down faster than the speed of sound. An intercontinental ballistic missile, the one that they were talking of here, has the NATO designation SS-31. If this is the one that was used, there's some debate on that at the moment. It's got a range of about 5,800 kilometres. It's fired from a mobile truck or specifically designed, and it effectively goes up to the edge of space and then comes down. It's designed to carry 4 independently targetable nuclear warheads or conventional warheads. So missiles are designed to take something that will go bang the other end. It could be conventional, could be nuclear, to have an effect. And it's all range. So you get short-range ballistic missiles, you get intercontinental ballistic missiles, then you get cruise missiles, which are completely different because they fly like an aircraft. They don't go up to come down very fast indeed.
And of course, we should be clear, there is no suggestion that this was armed with any kind of nuclear warhead. But the very fact that Vladimir Putin has clearly decided he wants to send a weapon designed to carry a nuclear warhead into Ukraine is pretty ominous. What do you make of that decision by Russia to launch one?
We've got a bit of manhood waving going on between missiles and missile sizes, because of course this week we had the US decision to authorize Ukraine to use the ATACMS missile inside Russia, which is a smaller missile. It's a ballistic missile. It's a tactical ballistic missile. And then we had, following from that, the reported use of the UK-French Storm Shadow or Scalp cruise missile inside Russia, and that is, a tactical missile as well in the warhead it carries, but it flies differently. And then Putin's going, well, my missile is bigger than your missile, so I'm going to fire what has been reported as an intercontinental ballistic missile. There've been some reports out of the United States and other places to say that no, it was just a normal ballistic missile. So there's different ranges that can be fired. Effectively the missile's bigger, it's longer, it's got more fuel. That gives it more range, and they can carry similar or the bigger missiles carry bigger payloads because they've got more thrust and more engine power in them.
How seriously do you think we should take the nuclear threat by Russia? I mean, Vladimir Putin in recent weeks has changed the Russian nuclear doctrine. He's essentially lowered the threshold that would be required for Russia to launch a nuclear strike. And this clearly will alarm a lot of people, this use of this intercontinental ballistic missile. So how seriously should we take that risk?
Well, I think as soon as anyone starts threatening nuclear responses, we should take it seriously, because we're not in a position to be able to react to that. And you can't get there quickly at all. So we need to start preparations in case someone uses it. Is Vladimir Putin going to use a nuclear weapon anytime soon, or are there any indications that suggest he's going to? No. And the reason why, even if he uses a tactical nuclear weapon, and that is usually defined on the range of the weapon and the yield that comes out of it, which is very important. Even if he uses a tactical nuclear weapon against the Ukrainians, or as a demonstration of his intent, as soon as he explodes that, as soon as he uses it, he will lose immediately the tacit support that he's relying on from China and from India. Those are the two big ones that would hurt him. Iran, North Korea wouldn't really care. But as soon as he does that, India will not want to accept any Russian oil to process into from crude oil into petroleum products and others that they can sell back to us at hugely inflated prices. And China will suddenly go, we can't get associated with this because of the trade sanctions that could come in, and we're going to have to condemn it and push you away. Putin knows if he does that, he will lose everything. His government will collapse. Russia will collapse as a country. He will lose his activity in Ukraine.
Moscow has also declared that the new American ballistic missile defense base in northern Poland, which was opened only last week, is a threat to Russia. And we've also had this week the temporary closure of the US embassy in Kyiv because of fears of a potential air attack. Is Putin trying to deliver a warning to the West and the US in particular at the moment?
Putin's playing the information game. What he wants to do is threaten us, and he's the bully with a big stick, and as soon as he thinks that the stick isn't big enough, he gets another one, and he'll stand there slapping the stick in his hand, and he'll slap it even louder, because he knows that will take up political capital in debating it. It'll create doubt in people's minds. He knows that there's a change of regime coming in the United States with the Trump presidency taking over from Biden. He's trying to influence that. It's all about influencing. He knows that there is going to be an election in Germany in 2025 because the German government's collapsed. He knows that there's debate going on around other parts of Europe and other parts of the world. So he's trying to maintain this strongman stance to those that are supporting him. So to China, you're showing that he's strong. To India, to Iran, to North Korea, to the wider BRICS community that he's part of, to try and suggest that Russia is still this strong country that's out there. And that's important to him, but it's all rhetoric. But if we look at how much debating time it's taking up with our politicians in the commentary that's going on, not just in the UK, but across the globe, he's succeeding in doing that.
If a nuclear strike by Russia remains highly unlikely, are we likely to see an increase in other kinds of tactics? I mean, specifically this so-called hybrid warfare, things like cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, sabotage, even targeted assassinations. The Times has been reporting about exploding parcels at distribution centres in the UK and Germany. Are those the kind of tactics we may see more of now?
Oh, 100%. We are seeing more of it. Only in the past couple of days, we've had the Chinese flagship, allegedly captained by a Russian in the Baltic, being accused of damaging or cutting internet cables between different states in the Baltic. And the Danish Navy went and have intercepted that ship, and it's currently at anchor while the investigation's ongoing. You mentioned the parcels in the DHL distribution centres, one in the UK, one in Leipzig in Germany. These were parcels that were going to go on aircraft that could have brought aircraft down, and they've been linked back to the Russians. We've seen there's been confirmed Russian activity in burning the Diehl factory down in Berlin. Now, Diehl is a huge arms manufacturer, and that mysteriously caught fire. We've had warehouses that have been storing and sending stuff to Ukraine in London that have caught fire, and individuals have been prosecuted. And as part of the court cases, their links to Russia has come out. And of course, going back historically, we've got the Novichok attack on Sergei Skripal in 2018, and then going even further back, we've got the polonium-210 attack on Alexander Litvinenko. It's always been there in the background, but yes, we are seeing a ramping up of activity. But the biggest area we're seeing a ramping up of is in the areas that is causing fractions between international organizations or in political structures within countries. It's getting that proverbial information knife in and wiggling it to try and create debate, to try and take up political time debating things that will mean that time can't be spent on dealing with issues that are coming out of Russia. And of course, it's stimulating other things that are around the world. If we look at what's going on in the Middle East, in particular with Israel, who's the big winner out of the 7th of October attack? It's Vladimir Putin, because he came off the front page headlines. And everything then focused elsewhere, and lots of political effort, military effort and diplomatic effort is focused on what's going on in Israel and going on in the Middle East. Putin's been quietly continuing what he's doing inside Ukraine and has been off the headlines.
This is a legitimate response by Ukraine using weapons supplied by the West. I personally don't believe that Putin is about to attack NATO territory with missiles. His response to the use of our longer-range missiles 2 or 3 days ago was one new form of missile fired into Ukraine, intended as a warning shot. But I don't think we should allow ourselves to be intimidated by the kind of rhetoric that Putin is using.
Well, the Home Secretary also gave us her response to concerns that Britain could become a target in Russia's war with Ukraine.
We've always seen the sort of blustering aggression from Vladimir Putin throughout this process. As you will know, we have stood by Ukraine from the very beginning of this. After this invasion, we have also supported Ukraine, including supporting them with equipment and with weapons that they need to defend themselves in the what they have had to endure with this invasion. So we will continue to do that, and I think we've seen that take support right across Europe and across the US as well. We've made our support for Ukraine clear.
That's the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. Well, President Putin of Russia has warned of a global conflict after Britain and the US allowed Ukraine to launch their long-range missiles at targets inside Russia. He says Moscow is entitled to retaliate against countries that allow their weapons to be used against Russia. Michael Evans is the former defence editor and contributor for The Times. Michael, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to speak to you. So then, this idea of the use of weapons belonging to, in this context, the UK and the US, legitimising, in our context, the UK in the eyes of Putin, is this just aggressive bluster?
Well, we've got become used to the aggressive bluster from Vladimir Putin, but I think, in a certain extent, everything should be taken seriously. Putin is getting his rhetoric up. I think it's probably time, hopefully, for some of this rhetoric to be played down a bit. It's getting to a dangerous position now. I mean, Putin is talking about Ukraine using these long-range weapons, British and American. Of course, they're not particularly long-range, as it happens. But, of course, they have the range and now the authority to use them in Russia itself. This is a moment of importance, I guess, if you're looking at it from the Kremlin eyes. And they have responded, as you know, with the launching of this rather bizarre hypersonic experimental medium-range ballistic missile, just one of them. While this missile is not necessarily going to cause massive damage symbolically, of course, it's another major escalatory move, and it shows that Putin is prepared to use all the weapons that he's got in his inventory to get what he wants in Ukraine. And if he decides that he wants to take some sort of countermeasures against Britain and the US and other countries in Europe, doing it, in their own countries, obviously we've become used to operations carried out particularly by their GRU military intelligence organization. So we know that he's capable of doing this, and I guess there is a serious risk that he might do it, as well as perhaps carry out cyber warfare operations. So I think the West has to be very aware of this danger and to be prepared for it.
And what does being prepared look like? Because Putin is notorious, as we're kind of getting at here, for shifting the goalposts. Every time the West has kind of called his bluff, actually there is a kind of new red line that he then draws while he kind of escalates the war on his own terms in many ways.
Did you hear that? So, I don't think people are wise. Like I said, go watch these two videos. This one is about Putin, and watch this series. All these that have AI, watch them. Watch all of this series. It's talking also the distraction. There is the mystery Babylon. This is where now I talk about the nations that will ban USA. So people, let me not mumble. Let me not talk too much right here. You can see for yourself in the scriptures if you do not want to follow what I said right here. Most of this is not just coming from my mind, also from a revelation that I got, then I just expand on it and clarify using visual things like this in a video. So I will leave it right here, and all I can say is stay blessed, stay safe rather, and be wise. Do not think Putin is a small boy. Use this one by reading the scriptures and finding out that he is no boy. He's going to cause trouble in this world. Goodbye.